Welcome to Shorty SuperCoach. How are we, guys? Going to run through the midfielders today. So, like the title suggests, every relevant midfielder will be talked about. What the hell does relevant mean? Well, I normally just go through, and if they're in at least 2% of sides, 3% of sides, I'll give them, some sort of a comment. It does mean that someone out there is thinking about them, even though that's pretty damn unique. But I think, even if it's just a handful of people that watch my channel that go, gee, I haven't heard his thoughts on this, and, at least this can be a bit of one-stop shop that you can get all the information that you hopefully are requiring. So, could be a lengthy one. It is time-stamped, as I always do. So, if you haven't joined the SuperCoach group or the footy tipping, I'd love you to do that as well. So, lots of videos coming out at the moment. I always do it. This last sort of week or so, I'm like, shit, 7 days till the start of season, and I've got like 11 videos I need to do. Okay, and I'm going to be pretty worse for wear on Sunday. Well, probably more worse for wear on Monday, actually. Got a bit of a long weekend session, so I'll be knocking back a few Malibus and a few vodka orange juices. Obviously, drink responsibly for those who are potentially underage watching my channel. But yeah, Shorty is going to have a bit of fun over the long weekend. It should be good. Been busy times, assessments, working, smashing out these videos. So I'm very much looking forward to it. But I'll tell you what, I started, not sure when I'll post this one, but it's Friday today. I started at 6 a.m, which isn't something I normally do. I just swapped with a mate just to sort of help him out with something he needed to do. And oh gosh, I'll tell you what, it seems okay now because I've had most of the day to do a few bits and pieces. But when that alarm went off at 5:40, yeah, that's right, 5:40. You're thinking, Shorty starts at 6. How on earth did his alarm go off at 5:40? I can tell you, I'd show you if it's probably not clear enough, but literally my alarms were 5:30. You'll hate this. So my mates hate this. 5:38, 5:40, 5:42, and then I just had a worst case scenario at 5:48. It takes me about, probably at that time, 8 minutes to get to work, so I was cutting it fine. But yeah, didn't have the greatest sleep because I was just my body clock wasn't really checked in to sort of going to sleep at 10 o'clock or 10:30 even. So yeah. Anyway, that's a little bit of a waffle on. Mark, if you're out there listening, I work with Mark, and he always says that I just talk absolute shit. And the last couple of minutes has probably been a good example of that. But we're going to get stuck into it. Jack Darling, all vaxxed up. That's good for the Eagles and sort of a bit relevant for us as well, with some rookie options or lack of maybe. So I'll just clear a bit of this. I was just writing something for tennis, doing some cherry research and just going through. There's my team. Nothing that you haven't seen already because it would not have changed since I last put out my update. But let's get stuck into it. Like I said, there'll be some that is pretty self-explanatory, or I've said quite a bit on over the pre-season. I'll try to kind of move on somewhat quick, but there might be some that we delve a little bit deeper on. So, yeah, thanks for your comments, your support. I hope you stick around to the end. Talk to you throughout in the comments as well if you want to chuck anything in there. But Jack Macrae, he's a good example of someone that's self-explanatory, one of the most popular players in the game, and rightfully so. You can lock him in and build your team around him. Same said for Jack Steele, absolute jet, finds his points, tackling, possessions. He's probably the biggest tackler in the game. Wasn't on fire through the preseason, but I don't think, just a preseason game. He's just getting some runs into the legs there, so nothing to get too concerned over. Now, Touk Miller, his ownership's probably jumped from, I reckon it was about 12 or 13%. Dominated against the Cats and preseason in general, and he's up to 21. Sort of that, I reckon, that big four, Macrae, Steele, Miller, and Oliver. Look, I've got 3. I'm honestly debating, and this all depends on the rookie situation and how we've got to go about it. I think you've got to have at least 2 of those guys. It's a mistake I've made previously, only sort of having 1, and it's just hard to get them all throughout the season because they barely dip. And I do feel like this is such a bankable 4. So I think you've got to have 2. As you can see, Miller's the least popular of the 4. but he showed to everyone, and myself included, that he means business. He's a star. Honestly, I've probably underrated him at times, bit of out of sight, out of mind, but watching the Cats game against the Suns, he works so hard from contest to contest, and yeah, he really did impress me, as he did last year, but it was just sort of rammed it home that, yeah, this guy's here to stay. So you can definitely think about starting with him. And Clayton Oliver, look, he's just a real favourite of mine. Like, if I do down, I'll definitely keep Macrae, but if I end up going with 2, depending on if I need some cash to splurge elsewhere, it'll be hard to split ways with Steele or Oliver, because I love them both. I probably have a bit more of a better relationship with Oliver over the journey. I've picked him a lot more times, and I just love watching him. I love watching Steele. No hate there, but I wouldn't really want to part with either of them. So those big 4, they're as reliable as we get. I reckon you got to have 2 of those. Bontempelli's in 11% of teams, and look, I think, he's maybe just a rung below, as the sort of, the points average suggests. Not far below, but there might be just a smidgen of concern about him playing slightly more forward. I know I've heard Beveridge mention it, and it will only be slight, but I think we're still going to see a big average from him. 115, thereabouts. Give a little, take a little. He'll still have a really good year. So he's not the flavour, but I think he's definitely a jet. We all know that. No love for Lions. Never seems to be. Tommy Mitchell, 10% of teams. The only thing I would say is that body. I was speaking to SuperCoach George the other day. He said something about some groin issues. I hadn't... Yeah, okay. Yeah, right, there you go. Top. That's interesting, just 7 days ago. So, look, I think I can understand a bit of a cooling off from him, because his body has gone through a fair bit over the journey. He's a bit more battered and bruised than he had been previously. Of course, I think I referred to it as a ACL, but I think he broke his leg. I think I was wrong when I spoke about that last. But, yeah, so he's probably not for me. When he's out on the park and fully fit, he's a ball magnet. I just probably prefer some others. So I definitely get the reason behind it. Just prefer some others. Sam Walsh in 2% of teams, but let go of him. Should be back sooner than we expect, but it's not going to be round 1, and there's no point holding on to him. Zach Merrett in 3% of teams, and I reckon he's about at your top end. I think 115's about as good as he's going to give you, but he's probably never going to give you much less than 108. He's probably 3 or 4 years now, having done it really, really impressively. So that's probably the only difference between him and Parish, is Merrett has a slight bit more longevity. Well, I guess 18 and 19 he dropped a little bit below, but the 2 years prior to that he was more around the 110, and the last 2 he's around 115. So I think you know what you're going to get, but you're probably not going to get too much more from where you're paying. And Parish, well, he burst on the scene last year, as we well know, and I think he's here to stay. I think he's a ball magnet when given that position, and why on earth would you move him? Because he showed exactly what he could do. So I think he's a really good option, contested ball beast, and just finds it so well. So he's not my cup of tea this time around. I'm just preferring to go with some other guys, but I definitely understand, there's 8% of his out there picking him, and I can definitely see why. And Ollie Wines is often... What you get with Ollie Wines supporters is you sort of get... He is overlooked. Is it because he's in Adelaide? Is it because he's maybe not as flamboyant and sexy in the way he goes about his game? He's just a real nuts and bolts, in and under, But the ones who are on board, they hate it when he doesn't get the respect he deserves. Brownlow medalist, they can't believe the ownership that he's got. Look, one thing I will say is sensational season last year. Is it not one out of the blue, but will it be the outlier? Just slightly, he's still going to average really well, but look at his numbers. From 2014 to 2020, he was between 97 and 104, aside from a dip when he was clearly injured just playing the 12 games in 2019. So that's the only thing I would say. It's sort of different to Parish. Parish has done it 1 year. Ollie Wines has done it 1 year. When I say 1 year, 110 plus. But Parish had a change in position, bang, does exactly what we expect. Wines, sort of out of nowhere. Don't really know why it happened. Is it just a career best season? And he sort of drops back to 106, 104 sort of vibes. Might be something to consider. Hopefully I think the neighbours are mowing the lawns. Hopefully that isn't coming through too brutally for you. But and we can move on to Petracca, who's a absolute favourite of mine. I mean, talk about maybe Wines not being a sexy player to watch. Well, Petracca is exactly that. He's a fantastic player to watch, dynamic, kicks goals, just can break games apart. Now, there is some people highlight a bit of a question mark on his disposal at times, and that's fair enough, but he's reeled off. It depends which way you want to shape it. You know, you could say when he broke out and averaged 118 or whatever it was a couple of years back, you could mount the case that he's slightly undervalued now. Or if you want to look through it as another lens, you might mount my case that I just gave to you to Wines. You might say, nah, career best year a couple of years back. He's just mainly a 110 sort of guy. It depends which way you want to cut it. He's definitely been in my team at times, you know, sort of earlier on when I first selected it. He might have been in my first team reveal potentially, but yeah, I don't see him coming back into it, but he's a star of the competition. Andy Brayshaw, 6% of teams. Seems to be a lot of hype about him, but not really reflected in the ownership. So I'm a massive fan. I could see him, you know, not exploding, because I don't think he is the sort of guy to explode. But what I could see is just a continual build in his career. So former high draft pick, ball magnet, just been waiting to get more and more opportunity, you know, and he'll get that again. And we've seen that slow grind, you know, it really broke out 101, 107 last year. He showed us that he had a ceiling with some massive, well, one massive score in particular against the Tigers. I think it was 190 late in the year. I could easily see him just, again, consistently boosting that to 111, 110, 113. I think Nat Fyfe is definitely returning to the midfield, he tells us, so that could be something to consider. Almost becomes a bit more interesting too when we're talking about Will Brodie. How much time can he get in there as well? You know, we start to look at it and you sort of go, well, there's now Mundy, Fyfe, Brayshaw, Serong, and Brodie's in there. Is he the fifth cog in that wheel? Will he get good centre bounce attendance? That's a discussion for another day, but I don't think Brayshaw's going to let you down. The only thing you might argue the case is we've never seen 110 plus before, so there's an obvious bit of risk. You know, we haven't seen it, so we're paying $580,000 for something we haven't seen before. So it makes it semi-speculative, but I'm pretty confident. I think he's a gun. Josh Kelly has received a boost. I mean, dominating a Pracky game will do that. Just ask Paddy Cripps, just ask Josh Kelly. You do it in those first couple of games prior to the big stuff, you get a bit of love. And he had 41 touches, was it? So he killed me last year. I think the first 5 weeks or so, he played, you know, a little bit more outside, on a flank, on a wing. Maybe that's what can sometimes happen when Leon Cameron gets a little bit funky with, he has so many midfielders. But yeah, I started him last year and look at that, 98, 90, 100, 90, 98, and then the 69 just killed me. So those first 6 weeks, if you take those out, it was a really good year again. Probably not quite, because he has averaged 115 before, 117 before his average. So I think there'll be a lot of people who'll be just, they'll take, you know, the 4 years prior, he was 110 plus. So I get the thinking, I just haven't gone that way. Crisp we talked about in the defensive options. Dangerfield in 2% of teams. I am pretty confident Paddy will return to some of his best footy, but not the footy we saw when he averaged, what was it, high 120s? Did he average 130 some stage? Can't remember. He's still going to be a star. He's still Geelong's most important midfielder and their most dynamic. When he's in the centre bounce, we're so much more dangerous. You would think he'll spend some time forward, but we still have Rowan, Sav, Hawkins and Cameron. So there isn't a massive need for him to play forward. So I feel like 110's very possible. But again, he brings a different sort of risk, and that's his age. So he is getting older now. We saw for the first time in his career him miss a chunk of footy last year. So that's got to be something to consider. So I guess a nice contrast between him and Brayshaw. Brayshaw, you're looking at the guy who's trending upward but never done it before. Dangerfield, he's declining but can still get back there, but is on the other side of the hill. So something to consider there. Josh Dunkley will be a chat for the forward line, but don't think we've got to chat too much. The bloke's a jet. Now, Nat Fyfe in just the 2% of teams, and I reckon he could be one that slides through nicely for your draft. You've probably already done your draft. I've got mine on Monday, but or one of. Somehow I found myself in 3 this year. I didn't expect that, but I think it's great for Fyfe and great for footy in general that he does return to the midfield. The sort of pre-season he's had, the body concerns, I think it'd be crazy to start him. I think it's better off to just say, look, Nat, all the best, my friend. I'll see how you go. If you're back to your best, I'll pick you up at another time. But to start with him would be fraught with danger, given he hasn't played any pracky games. He's had a really difficult period just getting back to full fitness. So I think it's probably someone we shouldn't look at. What do you want? I'm recording, bro. What do you want to say? You can come in if you want. Oh, did I lock it? Oh, sorry, man. Sorry, bro. Do you want to come in? Hey, man.
Hey, viewers of SuperCoach, Brisbane Lions, champions. Thank you.
That's all you wanted to say? Unsure if I'll edit that out or not. We'll just have to wait and see. You still there?
I'm listening.
Fucking little freak. That's what happens when you live with a bunch of freaks, They just start barging in through your door. But where was I? Lachie... McCluggage is in 2% of teams, but I probably feel like he'll be a beneficiary of this change up in the Brizzy midfield. It did seem as if Lions played a little bit less time in there. I think he had 8 centre bounce attendances, and it did seem like Bailey and McCluggage did benefit. They were up in the mid-teens, so that's something to consider. I'm not sure if I wouldn't start McCluggage, but it wouldn't shock me if we saw a bit of an increase in his numbers, so that's something to think about. And I don't think I have to spend too much time on Lachie Neale, because the bloke's a star. He's back looking really good. Got really good touch below his knees. I think for him that's always a big thing they talk about, that when he's up and running, that's what he's doing really well. Just working around the stoppage, getting involved whenever he can. So he's in nearly half of the teams, and I always wonder how they work out that percentage, How's he only in half the teams? There must be a bunch of incomplete teams or people who've got no idea, but 50% is about the majority of people that are taking it seriously. Obviously, Duncan and Taranto, forward line discussions. And we can probably, this is where, midfield really starts to get awkward. And we can probably go past quite a few options. Dusty, Whitfield, their discussions for other parts of the ground. Adam Cerra is in 4% of teams, but he's not for me. I just feel like he'll have a really big influence for the Blues. He'll make a massive difference for the footy club. I just think at that price, you're not getting value, like you're not making money really, and you're probably selecting him to be a keeper at that price, and I just don't see it happening. So I think he'll probably break the 100 mark. I think he'll be around either side of 100, but we're talking 105 plus at least when you're selecting him at that price, and I just don't think he's going to do it. Matty Crouch, similar can be said. He's a ball magnet, and he's sort of death by 1,000 cuts, isn't he? He's not exactly bursting out of packs or kicking goals or biting off incredible kicks, but he just accumulates and gets in there and lays tackles. But I've got just a fair few question marks about starting him, given he's just barely played any footy for so long. I know Rory Laird is out, so he'll get plenty of opportunity in there, but whether Laird in or out hinders him or helps him, I probably doesn't really matter. So he'll have a really good year if he stays fully fit, but that's probably an unknown. So I'm just more comfortable going elsewhere, considering how much footy he has missed. Tim Kelly's in 3% of teams. I don't really see any need for that. Played pretty well the other day, and he'll be the main man for sure in there at the start of the season for the Eagles, but has historically struggled with a tag too, so I don't really see any great upside there. We'll talk about DeGoey and Bailey and Thomas and Bolton all in the forward line. And here's a real interesting one. Real interesting. Paddy Cripps, 31% of teams. Now, is he back? Yeah, I think he probably is. Now, I'll ask you a question, and don't look. How old is Paddy Cripps? What do we reckon? Okay. All right, you got your guesses in. Very good. I would have probably guessed 27, 28. The bloke's 26. Now, I feel like there's a bit of a misconception that he's old and burnt out and cooked. He's back, fit and firing, dominated both practice games. Honestly, I know he burnt me so bad last year, and he has struggled at times with his body, but he has had to shoulder such a load. Hewitt and Cerra come to the club. Honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if he returns to 110 plus. I wouldn't be shocked at all. I think the big question is probably less about his scoring potential and are you prepared to risk that? Not even risk the scoring, but are you prepared to be potentially let down and burnt twice? That's the main thing I'm considering at the moment. I love watching him, one of my favourite players in the game, but I just don't want to have egg on my face for something I should have known to avoid. But then again, he's so damn tempting to try and get a bit of extra coin, so I'm going to leave it at that. I've been thinking about him a lot, I must admit, and clearly a lot of you out there have been too. So he's underpriced, that's a fact. Where can he get back to? Will he get back to that 107? Will he get back to that 117 that he's been at before? Or will his body start to let him down after 5 weeks? No strapping on the shoulders though, guys. That's always crucial. Paddy's looking fit and firing. Serong in 5% of teams. All of a sudden I feel like a lot of the thought was about Serong a couple of months ago. I feel like any Serong lovers has probably jumped just a few $1,000s further up and gone with Cripps. So I can see the merit in that because similar price, Cripps has done it many, many times before. So it probably makes sense. I think Serong is going to develop real nicely. And honestly, I sort of see him and Cerra averaging pretty similar numbers. I think he could probably go high 90s. He's still a few levels down in the pecking order in terms of the Fremantle midfield, but Gunn finally going to be given a more defined role because he's been thrown about, more centre bounces, less centre bounces, tagging role, he's had a bit of it all. Part of his development, I think he's ready to take it next level. I don't think he's ready to go absolute, keeper mode. Where we can probably start to scroll a fair bit. McInerney I spoke about in the defensive line. Now with these videos I won't go deep down into the rookies because I've talked about the rookies in another video and honestly all we can really do now is wait for the teams to sort of tell us what to do. I know one name that's going to come up pretty soon. Dacos, he's in 2% of teams, so I'll mention him, but I think you got the wrong Dacos. I scroll a little bit further to find Nick. I don't think Josh is your guy. Angus Brayshaw, same. Scroll up, you got the wrong Brayshaw. Otherwise, we've got Shiel in 3% of teams. I get where you're coming from. I just don't see it. He's going to have a better year if he stays fit, but I'm just not that enthralled by the selection. Lipinski, I think, is a great option in terms of the pies, but again, I'm just sort of... Look, we'll talk about Rowell in a second. Now, Shiel and Lipinski, I think if they stay fit, are going to have great seasons. Do really good things for their club. Probably average in the 90s. But you got to just... Is that enough? They'll make you 120 to 160k. Is that what you want? That might be what you want. That might be fine. They're not going to be keepers. And look, I have tossed and turned with Matt Rowell. I really have. I've said all pre-season that I didn't want to have a mid-pricer in my midfield. But Rowell has banged the door down. He's not in my team at the moment, but gee, he gives you something to think about, doesn't he? And that's the difference between Lipinski and Shiel versus Rowell, is that Rowell could genuinely average 3 figures. And there's nothing to suggest that he couldn't average sort of 107, 108. It's not impossible the way he goes about it. Such a talent. So you've only got to watch that game against the Cats to know what he's capable of. It just shows that he hasn't lost anything since his early days. He's missed so much footy. I think the real question mark is his body, and could he get tagged at some stage, and that would be something new to him that he hasn't dealt with all too often. So that's something to consider. But look, he could be anything. So buyer beware, of course. Anyone who's mid-price off the back of major injury issues, of course, we got to tread with some caution. But his upside, if fully fit, massive. Jordan Clark in 2% of teams, not so sure about that. Bit of a summer star, dominated the Pracky games, but no, thank you. Bad memories for me and Jordan Clark after last year. Very bad. And we'll talk about Jade Gresham in the forward setup, but look, I reckon we're probably starting to get towards the latter stages. There'll only probably be a couple of guys now that we talk about, and one of those is definitely Jarrod Berry. And the comparison has often been between him and Caldwell, so I'll probably talk about them in similar terms now. I think Berry, he's got the runs on the board. He's averaged high 90s before. Looks to be having a good role in that midfield again. I think he attended 11 centre bounces in the Pracky game the other day. Rayner didn't play. Something to think about whether it affects it too much. I would personally prefer to just try and find some extra coin to go up for Rowell if you're that way inclined. I think Berry will have a solid season. I do. I feel as if he really struggles to find sort of those easier possessions that can turn your 74 into a 89 or a 96. You know what I mean? He does the tackling well. He does the hard stuff well. I just don't know if he's found that other string to his bow yet where he just gets those easier possessions. But that's from someone who hasn't watched him regularly, but someone out there might know better than me. So he isn't floating my boat, but he's definitely of interest to a lot of you guys out there. I think he could definitely get back towards the 90s. I just prefer to maybe ration out my risk elsewhere, I guess. And Caldwell, very similar. I think if you're probably looking at one of the two coming into the season, and clearly Berry has put his hand up higher. Caldwell had his moments, but I just feel like he's quite a long way down what is a pretty deep Essendon midfield. He'll have his days. He'll have ripping quarters, depending what happens. But yeah, I think you probably would go Berry if you're going those options. For me, I don't have either. But, I would say if you were looking at one, Berry would be your guy. But they're both, they both have their lovers out there. 26%, 15%, they have their supporters out there. And I reckon that might just sum us up. I'll keep scrolling in case there's, sort of something that pops out. And if you're one of the 4% that has Constable, I'd take him out because, I think he's got an adductor issue and hasn't featured. So, I don't think he could be a handy guy throughout the year, but not to start. We'll talk about Brodie and that in the forward line. And then we sort of get into our midfield higher end rookies. So, yeah, I'm probably going to wrap it up there, guys. So, yeah, thanks heaps for tuning in. And thanks to everyone who's jumped on board recently. I said on the live session just how pleased and proud I was to hit the 3,000 mark the other day. It's nothing in the big schemes of YouTube channels, but to me, I was really pleased. It was something I've been hoping to get to for a couple of years now. So yeah, if you've been on part of this channel for 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 years, I really appreciate you being a part of it. I enjoy getting around to the comments and checking in on those when I can. So I really do appreciate your support, all the engagement, and appreciate the help of the Facebook pages as well. SuperCoach 360 and Serious SuperCoaches. They've definitely helped me a lot to kind of reach out to a few of you guys that I probably hadn't crossed paths with previously. So awesome to have you on board. It's been a massive pre-season. We're not far off it now, getting stuck right into the real stuff. So I'm really keen for that. So enjoy the long weekend, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Cheers.